Good afternoon, everybody. Well done for joining the live session this afternoon. We've just come straight out of a physics lesson, and now we're coming into a new lesson. So we're about to get started. It's just gone 2:15. David Oxley, I'm going to hand over to you from McAfee for your slides, and let's start off the session.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Hello all. It's a bit weird not being able to see anyone, but we'll go along. So I work in IT, but my background's in maths, hence why it says ex-maths teacher. So what I'm going to talk about today is how maths is securing the internet. We might think that computers are great, but without maths and things like that behind it, we're going to really struggle. However, before we can look at how we use maths to secure the internet, we need to understand what encryption is. And in order to understand how what encryption we're using today and why we're using it, we need to go back in time, and we need to start thousands of years ago so that we can start to understand why people used encryption. And then after that, we'll go into how maths is being used in the current day to do encryption. We'll talk about my career so far. We'll cover some key skills, and it's not all about the STEM subjects, regardless of the fact that this is an ICT one. And then, all being well, there'll be a good length of time at the end for questions. So, history of encryption, it goes way back. There was a guy called Plutarch, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He mentioned Spartan generals using a skytel. And a skytel is a wooden cylinder which had a piece of leather wrapped around it. And you wrote your message on it whilst it was wrapped around the bit of wood. Then when you took the leather off the piece of wood, it looks like garbage. And unless you've got a piece of wood the same shape, and they were typically hexagonal, so based on the beehives, unless you had the same size piece of wood, you wouldn't be able to decrypt the message. Now, this one was dated about 70 AD, so only 1,950 years ago. I am sure they were using various different forms of encryption or obfuscation of information way back before then, because it would have been used by the Egyptians, the people before them and before them, because they would need to get a message securely from person A to person B. Typically at that time, unless we're looking at some of the unusual ones, it would have been one man trying to get a message to another man, because most, by and large, the armies back then were typically male. And you've got to find some secure way of getting the message from one place to another place. You could get someone to memorize it. So as long as they didn't get caught and they didn't get the message beaten out of them, the message would be secure. That's assuming, of course, they hadn't forgotten about it. You might have played the whispering game when you were younger, where you stand in a line and you've got multiple people next to each other, and you whisper once the message from one person to the next one all the way along. And whatever you start with is not what you end up with. So that's why you end up with things like the skytel, so that you don't have to remember it. All you've got to do is make sure you've got the same size piece of wood. So what would typically happen here is that you would both get this, you would both create your two pieces of wood. One would go one way, one would go the other, and then you could start sending messages backwards and forwards across it. After that, we get on to some substitution ciphers. So these are relatively straightforward. I can say that the letter A is now going to be the letter N, so I'm going to shift it 13 places. And, you know, that's great. So as long as the person at the other end knows that I'm using a 13 shift, everything's fine. You could also do the reverse of the alphabet. So cat suddenly becomes XZG. You could do other bits and pieces. You could turn around and say, well, I'm going to shift the first 4 letters with a 4 shift, the next 4 with a 5 shift, and so on. However, once someone starts to realize what it was, what you're doing, they'll very quickly solve it. You can also do a seemingly random key. So instead of just shifting the letters 13 across, you could turn around and say an A is a G, a B is an A, and so on. And then we are back to the same problem that we had before, which was I need to give you the code, or sorry, I need to give you the algorithm. You need to take it away with you. But how do I ensure that that algorithm hasn't been compromised? And if I encode the message at this end and send it to you, anyone that's intercepted that and knows what the algorithm is, they can decode the message as well. So you've got a problem here that you've both got your secrets, but if someone gets hold of that secret key, they can intercept you on the way through. So computers then started to come into play, because up until now, it's pretty much just been someone with a bit of paper and away you go. But we had Second World War, and the Germans came up with an absolutely genius piece of kit called the Enigma machine. I won't go into how this works today, but if you ever get a chance to visit Bletchley Park, please do, because the Enigma machines they've got there are brilliant, and they've got people there that will explain it to you to the nth degree of detail.
David, just one quick question, if I may. Is that okay?
Yep. Of course.
I just thought, actually, for those students who might not actually recognise who McAfee are, just in terms of making that relevance of course, the company that you work for, your expertise, and why we're doing that session today, because some students might not actually know who McAfee are. I just thought.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I completely forgot about that. So McAfee are a software security company. We do everything. We're known as the device to cloud machine. In fact, if I can work out how to use PowerPoint, I do actually have this, so close your eyes, don't look, because otherwise you're spoiling the future slides.
And David, speaking like a true software architect, obviously, you're really passionate about what you do, and have you always been involved in computing, so to speak? Like the technical language that you're using today is fantastic.
Thank you. I've always been involved in computing. Yeah, I got a ZX Spectrum 48K in 1983, 4, maybe 5, and ever since then I've always had a passion for maths, but I've also and then I developed my passion for computing. Anyway, so McAfee, yeah, we're a device to cloud security company. We secure thousands or millions of different machines around the world. Some of our cloud services get hit by billions of queries each day, and you'll see us on mobile phones, on laptops. We're even in point of sale terminals. So, you know, when you go into a shop and someone is typing, is scanning your shopping, we could well have our software running on the background of that to secure it. We're also on cash terminals so that we try and make it as secure as possible for you to get your money out. I'll share these slides afterwards. I don't know how that works, but you can actually read through on what we do on both the consumer and on the cloud side. And I do have some slides here about my career, but I was going to do that afterwards. So is it okay?
Absolutely. I just wanted to make sure that students knew what McAfee were. And when we're talking about encryption, of course, it all now makes sense, but that's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that. Where are we? Yeah, so we were here. Yes, so this was absolutely brilliant. It didn't rely on you knowing what the 15 character shift was or whatever else. They had a one-time pad they used each day that would set up the rotors. Then they would send a test message across to make sure they both agreed with it. And then they could start communicating away they go. This was done, the settings of the dials was changed each day. So if I cracked yesterday's code, that's great, but I can't then use it today because they've changed the code. And then at Bletchley Park, they created the Bomb and Colossus and all these other wonderfully named machines. And there were hundreds of women working there, staffing it, because most of the men got sent off to war. So the women were the first computer operators. So despite the fact we've got less than 30% of the workforce in IT being females, they were the first computer operators. Men just took over. So we have to apologize to our female colleagues for that one. And this wasn't cracked by Alan Turing's famous for cracking it, but it was cracked because one of the operator kept using the same test word each day. And once they spotted that, they could then start to work out what the codes were, and they were then able to crack it. Now that's using computers back in the 1940s. The ones nowadays are amazing. I've got my mobile phone here. So this one here, and you may have heard this that multiple times from various different people, but the processing power in this mobile phone is greater than what they used to put the people on the moon with the Apollo missions.
Is that because it's an iPhone or any type of phone?
Any type of mobile phone, any type of modern mobile phone. No, my iPhone's over here. This one's Huawei, however you say it, the band company. But any modern mobile phone is more powerful than the computers they use to put people on the moon. And one of the main mathematicians behind the moon missions was again a lady. And it got to the point, and her name escapes me and I forgot to put it in the notes, but it got to the point where the astronauts were like, if so-and-so has checked it and she's happy with the numbers, then we'll fly. That's how well respected she was. So let's jump back in time again. And we're back to the SkyTail. How long do you reckon it'll take us to fix that, to crack that? How long do you reckon it'll take us to crack that with the computers today? And you're looking at less than a second, because no matter how long that piece of cord is, no matter how big or small you think that bit of wood can be, computers will be able to iterate through really quickly. And as long as they know what language it's in, they'll be able to solve it really quickly. And it's exactly the same for these, for the substitution one here, where we've got the key and everything else.
And David, when you say language, that's coding, right? That's why we code?
That is coding. So you could do it in Python, you could do it in Perl, you could do it in C, C++. You can go back into Fortran if you want to, or the one I learnt on, Pascal, but all of those will be able to do it. Python would probably be easiest, and that's the one that's taught for GCSE computer science. So we've been talking about something called symmetric encryption. So I use my SkyTail, I wrap my piece of cord around it, I write my message, you get the piece of cord, you wrap it around your SkyTail, you can read it. Problem here is the key must be kept secret, because if, as I mentioned with when we're moving the numbers around, we're moving the letters around, if somebody else knows the order I'm doing that movement in, then you can crack it. So what we end up having to do is keeping the key secret. If it's leaked, anyone can read the message. But how do you share the key? Back in the 1970s, in order to do this type of symmetric encryption between allies, they used to have planes flying around the world with the keys in them so that they could share them, and then they'd be locked away in the Pentagon and GCHQ and places like that. Now that's okay, but we're here to secure the internet. And if I want to send a message to anybody on this call, I don't want to have to then give you my key somehow securely and then come back to where I am and then send you the message. That seems a bit daft. I might as well just tell you the message whilst I'm there. So what we end up having to do is move on to asymmetric encryption. And this is how the internet is kept secure. We have two users here. I want to send information to somebody else. I use what's called their public key. They have a private key. I can encrypt the message using their public key. The only person that can then decrypt it is that other person with their private key. Anyone else tries to do it on the way through, they're going to fail unless they've got the private key or they're lucky. So the major advantage here is that anybody can have that public key. Anybody at all can see it, because all you're going to use it for is to encrypt it and then send it over to me. No one else can encrypt it. I then keep my private key as secure as possible. But, and this is the big one, I don't need to share my public key securely. My public key can be posted. I've got a GPG, good enough privacy key, and I can publish that on a website. I don't care, because all you need to communicate with me is my email address and that public key. You can then do the encryption, you can send it to me. One of the roles I've got at McAfee involves people sending me sensitive information about McAfee products. So we've published our public key. They use that to do the encryption. We do the decryption. No one else in the way through can intercept it. Now, I sent out some pre-work for this, which was to look at prime numbers. The key thing about a prime number is it's only divisible by itself and 1. If we then add in something called modular arithmetic, so modular arithmetic is if I've got the number 10 and I want to know what that is mod 4, sorry, I do 10 divided by 4 gives me 2.5, but I don't want that 0.5, I want it as a remainder, so it gives me 2 remainder 2. So 10 modular 4 is 2. 15 modular 6 would be 15 divided by 6, which is 2, and there's 3 left over. Or you could do 16 modular 6, and it would be 4, because you've got 4 left over when you've divided by 6. So we're going to use prime numbers and we're going to use modular arithmetic. Now, this is where we're going to get into some maths, and I've got a worked example here, and I am using really simple numbers, because as we go through this, you'll see how complicated this can get very quickly.
And
so
David,
just
quickly before we get into the complication of it, in year 9, were you this good in year 9, or has it taken you many, many years to get as good as you are at the moment? Like the technical language and the way your brain's working is amazing.
I loved maths as a kid, so doing powers, prime numbers, modular, that type of stuff, I loved when I was a kid. So I was a geek, and I still am. So back when I was a kid and I was in year 9, so that would be 13, 14-year-old, I was already able to do the GCSE syllabus. I was just, it just came naturally to me. I worked with other people that didn't find maths come as easily to them. So, they had to do more work. And one of the schools I was in, one of my best friends, he wasn't as good at maths as me, but he got better results in the exams because he worked harder. I just thought I could wing it.
And I just wonder, from some of our schools, I can see Bucks UTC are involved there. Any students in year 9 looking to get into coding, encryption, do put in the chat box any of your teachers out there, if any of your students are inspired by any of this at all, because I know the UTCs often love to get into coding and computer science. But I wonder how many schools and students are listening thinking, yeah, maybe this could be me in the next few years. Sorry, David.
That's all right, no problem at all. So we're going to use 2 prime numbers. Okay, we're going to use 5 and 11, mainly because everyone can work out with a calculator or otherwise that 5 times 11 is 55. We're now going to find the lowest common multiple of 5 minus 1 and 11 minus 1. I still don't quite understand why we have to do this bit, or why we do the 5 minus 1 and 11 minus 1, but that's the rules. So we do lowest common multiple of 4 and 10, which happens to be 20. I told you we're using simple numbers. We're now going to say that my public part of my key is 3. Again, it's a prime number. It's not a factor of 20, so I'm allowed to use it. To work out the private part, this is the best bit. You're going to love this one. You do 3 to the minus 1 mod 20. And apparently that gives you 7. because 3 times 7 is 21, 21 mod 20 is 1. Now, you have to do this bit because this is where we've calculated the public and the private key. The public key is 3 and 55. The private key is 7 and 55. Now, I've written the private key smaller because remember, we've got to keep this really, really secret, because if we don't, someone can decrypt the messages. And now we're going to get someone to send me a message. Keeping this simple, we're going to use the number 9. 9 to the power of 3 happens to be 729. Got a nice calculator and it does that for me. You do mod 55 and it happens to come out at 14. So you've done 729 divided by 55 and there's a remainder of 14. Now, they send me that number 14. I now need to decrypt it. I'm going to use my private key, which is 7 and 55. So I'm going to do 14 to the power of 7, which everyone knows, or not, because you've got a calculator to do this, 105,413,504. Then we do mod 55 and we get 9. Now, someone intercepts my message on the way through and they guess that my private key is 6. But when you do 14 to the power of 6, it only gives you 7,529,536. Do that mod 55 and we get 36, so they failed. Now, if I was to use 5 and 11 with a public part of 3 as my key, if we went back to that stopwatch earlier, we wouldn't be doing that in seconds. It would be milli or microseconds. So in order to keep the internet secure, we now use 2 prime numbers. Each one is greater than 1 billion. So each one's got more than 9 digits, or 10 because you've got the 1 at the end. So each one's got 10 or more digits and it's a prime number. Finding prime numbers is relatively straightforward. You pick an odd number, you check it's not divisible by 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, and so on all the way up. And you only have to go to the square root of that number and you will find it. So you can get your prime numbers. Now, you've got those 2 prime numbers. We're going to repeat this example. And I'm just going to pick on one number here. I'm going to pick on the 105,413,504. If I've got 2 prime numbers and the public and private part of my key greater than 1 billion, how big's that number going to be? Yeah, because if you do 1 billion times 1 billion, you've got 9 zeros times 9 zeros. That gives you 18 zeros. Then you've got your other one, because you've got to do the power of it. And it's just suddenly like the number just goes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I've got a 2-meter arm span and I'd run out of space to actually write that number down.
And David, I'm just conscious of, we've probably got 5-6 minutes left. I just wonder, okay, in layman's terms, what does this all mean in terms of encryption or decryption, things going wrong? What could happen in your world, so to speak?
So let's take a nice simple example. We want to go shopping. I want to send a message to my bank. If this gets decrypted, someone could steal the money out of my account. You know, when you see the little padlock at the top of your screen, your web browser, if that fails, someone could snoop on your traffic, and then you could see, they could see your transaction.
And David, is this type of thing that hackers in big banks, for example, get paid to try and hack the systems to make sure that they are secure? Is that the type of thing that happens?
Not in this area, no, because once you've got your public and private key, that's secure. However, what they would be doing is they'll be hacking the software either side to see if there's a vulnerability there that they can get through, because they're unlikely to crack the encryption because it's so complex, or the numbers are so big that it starts to take eons to solve. But they can hack the software.
Right, fantastic. And just to make a quick shout out to teachers, we've probably got three or 4 minutes left. I do want to go over just a little bit because we started a little bit late because we were in physics before. If there are any questions whatsoever, please do pop them in the chat box. I've just written in there. Any questions from students or teachers, do pop them in while we've got David here. David, just a few minutes left.
Yep. So how did I get here? I had love of mathematics, as I told you. I told you I was geeky. At the end of my first year at university, I taught myself to multiply 9-digit numbers together in my head because I was bored and it was better than studying for exams. And then I became a teacher because I have a love of maths. You might have heard the passion, and I wanted to share things. Trouble is, I was very good at breaking things, so I went and worked for the MOD. I didn't break the tornado you see there, you'll be delighted to hear, but what I did do, there's a little black spot just over the top of the nose, and that would be where my sensor that I was working on would have gone. And then I ended up in computing. And yeah, the monitors were that big when I started. They're not the nice flat screens we have now. But in more detail, I trained as a maths teacher, and then I did a load of different roles, and I'm now a software security architect. Technically, I'm a senior one, but I'm older than most people, so that's why. Non-technical, though, is the English. I hated English at school. I scraped by. I got a C, I think, out of sympathy from the examiners. I now do more writing than I do coding. And continue learning. You've got to learn to learn. You know, I get given new problems at work, and I've got to work out what's going on and how to solve them really quickly. Typically, you'd go for a degree in one of these things, or you'll do an apprenticeship. I love apprenticeships. They weren't around when I was there, but if you can do one of those, that would be great because you get paid to work, you get your tuition paid, you end up earning more at the end of your 3 or 4 years than a graduate would earn, and you've got no debt. Yeah. You need to love what you're doing. That doesn't mean you only pick something you're doing now. You pick something that you think you could learn to love. So I love maths, but I've ended up in computing. Computing was a hobby. I was lucky. So I enjoy what I'm doing. If I didn't enjoy what I'm doing, I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't have a desk job ever. And yeah, I've had one for the last 20 years. But as I said, computing was my hobby. So whilst computing was my hobby, then when I left teaching, I could pick up computing because I started in programming in 96 was when I joined the MOD. So I've been programming on and off for the last 24 years. And the other one is never stop asking questions. You know, the more questions you ask, the more you're going to learn. Someone's going to go, oh, that's a silly question. But if it's a silly question, why am I asking it? I'm asking it because I don't know the answer. Now, you could Google it, but it's much more fun to actually talk to people. You know, this one I'm finding really weird because I can't see anyone. I'm basically talking to the camera on my laptop.
It is strange. However, we have got a couple of questions from Chiltern Hills Academy. Brilliant. Well done, guys. Why did you choose to work at McAfee?
It was based in Aylesbury, and that's where I live. But
okay, so location.
It was purely location. However, now that I'm here, I love what I'm doing because I'm keeping the internet. I'm helping keep the internet secure. So wow. You get to do all those wonderful things on it.
Wow. And I've got another question here saying, are there any other jobs in the company that don't require IT skills?
Yes, we've got finance, we've got HR, we've got sales, we've got security guard if you wanted to do that. There are like any big company, you don't have to be a techie to work for it because you've got all of those background activity, well, not background, but all of those non-techie roles that are required to make everything else work. We've got a site project manager. Her job is to run events and organize outreach activities. Fantastic. She's not technical, but she's brilliant at organizing those events.
Okay, that's really good to know. Of course, we've got to think wider than just the tech that the company does. So a question from Alan, how important is it for students to learn a coding language and have an understanding of a language to get on in the computing industry?
So if you're going onto the software side, I'd say it's critical, and regardless of what role you want to go into, because you will end up automating something. I spent more time in the last 5 years, I've spent more time writing code in Excel to speed things up than I have doing Python, C, or anything else. But because I know those other languages, I could pick up the VB to do those things behind the scenes. The other way I like to think of it is look at Lewis Hamilton. He's a brilliant racing car driver. But one of the reasons he's brilliant is because he understands how the engine and everything else that goes into that car works. So if you want to be in the software industry and you don't understand how coding works, you're going to be at a disadvantage because you haven't got the full picture all of the time.
Brilliant. David, a chance for any more questions or any final statements from David. We have over one slide just because it's such an interesting lesson. Is this the final slide, David?
That is the final slide. I've got other slides after here, but they are just to tell you about McAfee in case you're interested. And then I've actually got the formulas behind it as well, if anyone wanted to look into it. But I thought that would be a bit much. And then, yeah, we got the pre-work that I sent out. So.
And that's fantastic. Any homework for the students, David?
Think about what you enjoy doing and then look for careers around what you enjoy doing. And if someone asks you to do something, give it a go. The worst that happens is you have to ask them questions to work out what you're doing. The best that's going to happen and more likely is you're going to be exposed to something new, and then you'll learn something, and that may spark an interest, and you find a career that you didn't expect you'd want to go into.
No, brilliant. Guys, I'm going to have to end it there. David from McAfee, such an interesting lesson today. We have overrun. I'm sorry for that, teachers and students, but I think my main takeaway was looking at the passion and the technical knowledge and expertise of David. He loves his job. He's obviously found something that he's really passionate about. And you can see there that, you know, the language and the expertise that he's portrayed today. Goodness me, hopefully there's some more budding IT techies out there who are going to go and follow in your footsteps, David. So thank you very much for your time, David, and well done for everyone for joining. Thank you very much.
Thank you.